The lobby of the Ashford Grand smelled like money, not in a subtle way. In the way of fresh-cut white roses changed every morning, of leather so polished it reflected the chandelier above, of whatever they burned in those small brass diffusers near the elevator banks that cost more per candle than most people's electric bills. It was the kind of smell that was meant to communicate something before a single word was spoken. Camille Deveraux had walked through 1,000 lobbies like this one. She wasn't thinking about the smell. She was thinking about her feet. She'd been in the car since 4 in the morning. First a flight from Dulles to Atlanta, then a connection that sat on the tarmac for 40 minutes while the crew waited on catering. She had a meeting at 2. She had a call at 4. She had a dinner tonight she didn't want to attend, and a board presentation tomorrow morning that she'd already revised 3 times on the plane. She was wearing gray slacks, a white t-shirt she'd bought at an airport gift shop because her checked bag had gone to Cincinnati, and a pair of flat-soled walking shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back. She had on no jewelry except for a thin silver watch that she'd had since law school. Her rolling carry-on had a broken zipper held shut with a binder clip. She looked, in other words, like a woman who had traveled too far and slept too little. She did not look like the majority shareholder of the Ashford Group. That was fine. She had never cared much about looking like what she was. She wheeled her bag toward the front desk, already pulling out her phone to check whether the upgrade she'd requested had come through. The lobby was busy. A conference somewhere in the hotel, judging by the clusters of men in matching lanyards near the far corridor. A bellhop moved past her with a cart stacked 6 bags high. 2 women in heels were laughing near the concierge desk. Camille reached the front desk and set her phone on the marble counter. "Hi, checking in? Deveraux." The man behind the desk looked up. His name tag said Dirk. He was young, mid-20s, with the kind of groomed assurance that came from working somewhere expensive long enough to absorb its atmosphere. He looked at her, just for a second, the way a person's face does when the mental image they'd assembled doesn't quite match what's standing in front of them. "Do you have a reservation?" he said. "I do. Deveraux, Deveraux. Derek looked at his screen. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A slight straightening, a recalibration, the way someone moves when they've seen something they don't entirely believe. "I'm not finding anything under that name." "Try the first name, Camille," he typed. Looked at the screen again, and this would be for tonight, 1 night. Possibly 2, depending on how the meetings go. "What kind of room?" Camille blinked. "I'm sorry? What kind of room did you reserve?" "The presidential suite," she said. There it was, the pause, small enough that anyone not paying attention would have missed it. Derek looked at her once more, and this time the look was not subtle. It was the look that said, "You and the presidential suite do not belong in the same sentence. That suite is currently reserved for," he began. "For me," Camille said. "I assure you." He typed something very slowly, moved his mouse, typed again. "I'm going to need to verify the reservation," he said. "If you'd like to take a seat in the lobby," he gestured vaguely toward a cluster of chairs near the window, the kind of gesture that meant step away from my counter. Camille did not move. "How long will that take?" "Shouldn't be long." She knew what shouldn't be long meant. She had been told shouldn't be long in rooms like this before. It meant long enough that you might leave, long enough that the problem might solve itself. "I'll wait here," she said. Derek glanced up from the screen, a flicker of something. Displeasure, maybe? Or surprise that she hadn't moved. "Of course," he said, with the particular smoothness of someone trained to say things they don't mean. The manager arrived 4 minutes later. Her name tag said Patricia, assistant manager, and she had the brisk walk of a woman who had been interrupted from something else and intended everyone to know it. "Miss," Patricia glanced at Derek, who said something under his breath. "Deveraux," Camille supplied. "Miss Deveraux." Patricia smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. "I understand there's been some confusion about your reservation." "No confusion on my end," Camille said. "I reserved the presidential suite 6 weeks ago. My assistant confirmed it on Monday. Here." She held up her phone, the confirmation email already open. Confirmation number 887 Delta 44. Patricia looked at the phone without touching it. "I see," she said, in the way that meant I see something I don't want to deal with. "The issue," Patricia said carefully, "is that the suite has been held for a VIP guest arriving this evening. We weren't informed that there was a concurrent booking. There's no concurrent booking, Camille said. There's my booking, which was made 6 weeks ago. If someone made an error on your end, I'd like it corrected. Patricia looked at her. That same look Derek had given her, filtered through a decade more of professional veneer, but the same look underneath. I understand your frustration, Patricia said. What I can offer you in the meantime is one of our deluxe king rooms on the 14th floor, complimentary, while we sort this out. I don't want the 14th floor, Camille said. I want the suite I booked. Camille Deveraux. Who is the VIP guest? Patricia blinked. I'm not at liberty to, because I'd like to know who was double booked into a suite that was already reserved, Camille said. Her voice had not risen. It had done something else. It had gone very quiet and very level, in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with precision. I'd like to know whether that was a system error or a judgment call. The words landed. Patricia's smile held, but it had gone rigid at the edges. If you'll allow me a moment to speak with my colleagues. Take your time, Camille said. She set her carry-on upright, clasped her hands on the counter, and waited. Patricia retreated. There was a murmured conversation behind the desk, punctuated by the click of a keyboard. Derek had found somewhere else to look. A second employee, a young woman Camille hadn't noticed before, had gone very still in the way that meant she was trying to become invisible. Camille took out her phone. She had 3 emails she needed to respond to. She answered them. Patricia came back 7 minutes later. Beside her was a man in a dark suit, the general manager, judging by the way he walked, the way everyone else slightly adjusted when he appeared. His name tag said Warden Goad. Miss Deveraux, Warren said, extending a hand. I apologize for the wait. I'm Warren Gould, general manager. I've reviewed your reservation personally, and you're absolutely correct. Your reservation is valid and has been since February. The suite should never have been reassigned. He paused. I want to offer my sincere apology for the confusion at the desk. It wasn't confusion, Camille said, looking at him steadily. Your staff looked at me and decided I didn't belong in the suite I booked. I'd like you to understand that's what happened. Warren Gould was a man who had managed difficult guests for 20 years. He had a face trained for de-escalation, but something in what she said made that face briefly still. I understand, he said. He said it like he meant it. Good, Camille said. Now I'd like my room. She was escorted to the presidential suite by Warren himself, who carried her broken zipped carry-on without being asked and said nothing about the binder clip. The suite was on the 31st floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a living area with a white grand piano no one ever played, a bathroom with a soaking tub overlooking the city skyline. There was a welcome arrangement on the coffee table, white roses, of course, and a bottle of champagne in a silver bucket. Camille set her phone on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. She was 51 years old. She had been checked into hotels on 6 continents. She had been mistaken for a housekeeper, a driver, a conference attendant, a delivery person, and once, memorably, a woman who had wandered into the wrong building. Each time, she had the same thought, not for long. She ordered room service. She showered. She answered the rest of her emails. At 11:45 that morning, she made a phone call. It's me, she said when it picked up. I need you to pull the last 18 months of guest complaint records for the Ashford Atlanta and the quarterly staff review reports. Everything, Camille said, and pull Derek Ames' file. That's AMES, front desk, and Patricia Dumont's. She's the assistant manager. I want to see their prior incident records. What happened the usual? She said. There was a pause on the other end. The person who worked for Camille had worked for her for 9 years. They knew what the usual meant. Understood, they said. Give me an hour. Camille hung up. She walked to the window and looked out at Atlanta. The city stretched out below her in the midday sun, glass towers and green squares and the ribbon of the highway. She'd bought her first piece of real estate in this city when she was 29. A 3-unit building in Bankhead that everyone told her was too risky. She had held it for 4 years and sold it for 3 times what she paid. The Ashford Group had come later, 12 years ago. 7 hotels then. 23 now. This one had always been the flagship. She thought about Derek looking at her rolling bag. She thought about Patricia's smile that hadn't reached her eyes. She thought about being gestured toward the chairs by the window, the way you'd wave off someone selling something outside a store. She turned away from the window and opened her laptop. The 2 o'clock meeting was with the regional VP of operations, a man named Brian Cole, who'd been with the Ashford Group for 11 years and was, by all accounts, very good at his job. He had flown in from Houston. He was waiting for her in the small conference room on the 29th floor when she arrived. "Monsieur Deveraux," he stood. "It's good to finally—" He stopped, recalibrated, the same fraction of a second recalibration she'd been getting since the lobby. "I didn't realize you were staying in the hotel." "I am," she said, and sat down. Brian Cole was competent and organized. He had prepared materials. The meeting ran 90 minutes. They covered 3 quarters and 2 capital projects and the staffing pipeline for the spring opening in Nashville, and at the end of it he shook her hand and said he looked forward to the board presentation tomorrow. He had not known who she was this morning. He knew now. That was always how it went. At 4:15, Camille received the files. She read them carefully. She had learned years ago to read carefully, not for the obvious things, the written complaints and formal incident reports, but for the spaces between, for what was not written. For the pattern underneath the paper, there were 11 guest complaint records from the Ashford Atlanta in 18 months that mentioned front desk interactions. 6 of them involved guests of color. Of those 6, 5 described variations of the same thing she had experienced this morning: the uncertainty, the delay, the suggestion to wait somewhere else, the request to verify in ways that white guests with the same reservation class had not been asked to verify. One of those 5 complaints had been escalated to management. The other 4 had been logged and closed within 48 hours. The staff review reports were professionally written. Warren Gould ran a tight property. His numbers were good. His guest satisfaction scores were strong. And yet, she closed the file. She sat for a moment. Then she opened her calendar and scheduled a meeting. At 8 o'clock the next morning, before the board presentation, before the Nashville staffing discussion, before the Q3 review, Camille sat down in a small conference room with Warren Gould, Patricia Dumont, and a woman named Celeste Bridges, who was the Ashford Group's head of HR for the Southeast region. Warren had clearly not slept well. He had the look of a man who had spent the night trying to determine exactly how bad this was going to be. "I want to be clear about why we're here," Camille began. She did not have papers in front of her. She did not need them. "This is not about my check-in yesterday. That's one incident. What I'm here to talk about is the pattern that check-in sits inside." She laid out what she'd found. 6 complaints, 4 closed without follow-up, the specific language in each, the similarities. She spoke evenly, the way she always did, the way her law professor had taught her. "The facts don't need your emotion, Ms. Deveraux. The facts need your precision." Warren listened. Patricia had gone very still. "I want to be clear about something else," Camille said when she had finished. "I am not here to punish this property. I am here because this is the flagship. What happens here sets the standard for 22 other hotels. If this is happening here with these complaint rates in a hotel I own—" She paused very briefly. "Then we have a system problem, and system problems require system solutions." Warren nodded slowly. "What I am going to do," Camille continued, "is require a full bias and equity audit of this property's guest services protocols. That audit will be conducted by an external firm. It will take 8 weeks. During that 8 weeks, every front desk employee and manager on this property will complete updated training. Not the module in the current onboarding package, which I've read and which is insufficient, but a curriculum that Celeste's team is going to build from the ground up." She looked at Celeste, who was writing quickly. "I want that curriculum ready for pilot in 60 days. "Yes, ma'am," Celeste said. "The 4 complaints that were logged and closed without escalation, I want those guests contacted personally. I want an apology, and I want it to come from you, Warren, not from your assistant." She looked at him. "Not because you're being punished, because an apology means more when it comes from the person responsible." Warren swallowed. "Understood. And I want a protocol change. Any guest complaint related to front desk treatment, regardless of how it's categorized, goes to the regional HR office within 72 hours. Not optional, not at management discretion." She looked at Patricia. "That includes incidents that don't become formal complaints. That includes incidents where the guest doesn't complain at all," Patricia said quietly. Like yesterday, Camille agreed. There was silence in the room for a moment. Then Warren said, "Can I ask you something?" Camille waited. "Why didn't you say who you were at the desk? You could have. It would have resolved everything in 30 seconds." Camille looked at him. She considered the question, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give him the real one. "Because I shouldn't have to," she said. "That's the answer. A guest checking in with a valid confirmation number shouldn't have to prove that they belong in the room they booked. That's true whether I own the building or not." She paused. "The woman who walks up to that desk without a name they recognize, she deserves the same check-in I got once. Warren Gould came downstairs. That's what I'm here for. Not for me. I already have the room." Warren looked at the table. Then he looked up. "I understand," he said. This time it landed differently than it had in the lobby. The board presentation went well. Camille made it through the Q3 review. The Nashville timeline, the renovation budget for the Dallas property, and a 30-minute discussion about the loyalty program's declining enrollment among younger guests. She drank 2 cups of coffee and ate half a croissant from the tray at the center of the table and answered every question that came her way. At one point, one of the board members, a man named Theodore Ashby, who had been on the board since before Camille had acquired the company, and who had never, in 12 years, quite managed to conceal his skepticism about her leadership, said, "I hear you had a little trouble at check-in yesterday." He said it lightly. The way men sometimes say things, with just enough lightness to make it difficult to object to. "I had an experience that's going to lead to some important policy improvements," Camille said, without blinking. "So not trouble, data." There was a beat of silence around the table. Then someone laughed, and the moment passed. After the meeting, as people were gathering their papers and filtering toward the door, Celeste Bridges caught Camille near the window. "That was..." Celeste started. "Do the curriculum," Camille said. "Don't make it compliance theater. Make it something that actually changes what people do when a woman with a binder clip on her suitcase walks up to their desk." Celeste smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Camille picked up her bag, the broken zipped one, still held shut with the binder clip, and walked toward the elevator. The lobby was busy again. A different conference crowd this afternoon, different lanyards. The brass diffusers were still burning. The white roses at the entrance had been changed. Fresh ones, 3 inches taller than yesterday's, arranged with the kind of precision that cost more than it should. Derek was at the front desk. He saw her coming, and she watched his face go through 3 things in approximately 1 second. Recognition, recalculation, and something that was not quite shame but was adjacent to it. She walked past the desk toward the door. She didn't stop. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. There is something we do not talk about enough when we tell stories like this one. We love the part where Camille calls her office. We love the part where Warren Gould comes downstairs, and the tone of the whole thing shifts. We love the fleet grounding, metaphorically speaking, the moment where the person who was dismissed turns out to have the power to make the building answer for itself. We love that part because it is satisfying in the way that justice is satisfying, when it is clean and immediate and proportional. But here is the thing that Camille knew, that she was thinking about when she sat on the edge of that bed and looked out at Atlanta. Most people do not own the building. Most people walk up to that desk with a valid confirmation number and get gestured toward the chairs by the window. And they wait. And the problem does not resolve itself, because no one is coming downstairs. And they either fight for the room they booked, which costs them time and energy and a specific kind of emotional labor that is invisible to everyone except them, or they accept the 14th floor and add it to the count and carry it home. That is the story underneath this story. Camille Deveraux did not change that story by checking into the presidential suite. She changed it. If she changed it. If the audit happens and the training is real and the protocol actually gets followed. By refusing to let the building forget that she was there. By naming what had happened not just to her, but to the 5 people in those files, whose complaints had been closed in 48 hours without a callback. Dignity is not something you earn by revealing the right credentials, but it will never be protected by people who have the power to protect it and choose not to use it. Camille used it. So here is a question we want to leave you with, and we mean it genuinely. If you had been at that front desk and watched the whole thing happen, watched Derek give her that look, watch Patricia smile without meaning it, Watched a woman who had every right to stand where she was standing get quietly pointed toward the chairs. What would you have done? Most of us don't own the building, but most of us are in the lobby when these things happen. And doing nothing is also a choice. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, if you found yourself nodding at any part of it, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear it. Leave us a comment with what you would have done. We read every single one. And if you're new to Velvet Reckoning, welcome. We tell stories like this one. Stories about what happens when the wrong person finally has enough. We'll see you in the next one.